All right. So the reason why I like Fireside Chats a lot is that one of the things that, and go ahead and scan the QR code. This is where you're going to be able to put in the questions for you would like Sunil to be able to answer. But the first thing I really want to ask Sunil is when you're trying to think about AI and all of the progression that you've done, what was the hardest thing about getting started when you were thinking through all these different models? Like, how did you get that in perspective, and kind of where did you come from to reach some of these conclusions?
So I mentioned earlier, there's more available to us from an information standpoint than we can ever possibly imagine. But I think the challenge that we face is just how to sort through it all. And the mental models that I shared at the very beginning, there's like hundreds of mental models that we can use. The real question is which is the right one? What I do is actually I hold a handful of them in my mind at a time and try to basically pattern match and fit when the right occasion occurs. Well, you find the right occasion to say, oh, this is the perfect mental model for something, and all of a sudden things become much clearer because that mental model helps shape your understanding of all that information that you're trying to process. Moreover, what's actually really fascinating about these mental models is it helps you understand what is wrong as well. Because right now, as we all know with the hallucinations in this issue, you may struggle to figure out how to parse through all that. But a mental model, by putting a mental model in front of the LLM to begin with, you can actually really quickly spot where the flaws are.
That's great. So switching over to one of the things I see as a big problem in a lot of companies today, the business leaders are trying to make decisions about, what do they do about AI? How much should we, pull AI into the organization, or should we even implement AI into our products and solutions? How should they approach this with kind of your presentation today? This might be overwhelming to someone, who's a business leader. So for everyone in here who's trying to convince your organization that, hey, we need to implement AI and it shouldn't be scary, don't just shut it down. How do you explain, the risks associated with this to a business leader so we could empower a lot of the folks in here?
Sure. So that governance model I showed you at the end of having a pathological, and by the way, you don't have to use the word pathological. It could turn people off, right? But having a pathological, having a bureaucratic counterbalance to the generative use cases is what's going to be necessary. The generative use cases are going to definitely dominate. That's what drives the business forward. And you don't want the security department being the department of no is not going to win over a lot of people if you keep saying can't do that. But at the same time, to understand that there is a balance that's necessary and to use these mental models to explain that there's all these mental models are meant to help us understand that these are frameworks that are well tested and well understood. Having those frameworks at your disposal to say, look, we're out of balance because all we have is this generative movement and nothing on the other pieces should give you reason to say, hey, what are we doing about these other pieces that need to be part of the equation as well? So again, the mental models are really help there as a thinking tool for you, but also as a way to basically make a case for why you need certain types of controls to offset what the business is trying to do as it moves really fast and deploying more of these AI systems.
All right, last question, then we'll go to the questions from the audience. So keep on upvoting, downvoting, that way we get a really good feel for the questions we want to ask here. I do think that second question, though, was answered in the last one, but we'll see if you want to focus more on it. But go back to your presentation. You recommended a book, but kind of curious, what other books should those in the audience potentially read to develop the right mindset, or just something that you found fascinating in the AI space, or just, the mental models that you're trying to approach?
That's a tough question because I read about a book a week. So I go through a lot of books. It's the best investment of your time, right? For the dollar and cost, it's better than even Sands. Sorry. But anyway, for the cost. But that's it. Sands is great too. A couple books. So there's what's called The Great Mental Models on the mental model side by Shane Parrish. Great Mental Models. It's a whole series of books on just different mental models. But when it comes to AI itself, depends on what you're trying to consider. One of the best ones is I thought was Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of AI. If you want to understand, before he got really crazy, if you want to understand why Musk invested in OpenAI, why he invested in Neuralink, why he invested in SpaceX, Life 3.0 gives us a really clear vision of like his playbook effectively. Again, this is before he went crazy, but that's it. Life 3.0 is a great book. Even if you just read even the preface, okay, there's a really interesting story in the preface that reads almost like OpenAI. That's fascinating to read. I mentioned the Brief History of Intelligence. That's another good book as well. And there's plenty more coming out, but those I think will be good starting points.
That's great. Now, during break, I'm not going to ask you this up here, but I'd like to ask you what books, because you read a lot of books, you probably have a very firm opinion on this. Which books would you not recommend we read? Now, that's a hallway question, so you want to go up to Sounil in the hallway and find out this answer. I go through a lot of books too, and there's some books I like start flipping through. I'm like, okay, this is not the book that I thought it was. All right, we're going to go to questions that's out here. First question, upvoted a lot. Based on what you know today and how quickly technology is moving every day, what do you think the biggest AI breakthrough innovation will be in the next 5 years?
All right, so another book that is a pretty good book in this general category would be Ray Kurzweil's Singularity is Near, and then there was another one that came out called Singularity is Nearer. So Ray Kurzweil, people may also have already heard the term singularity, and his projections are basically there's a whole bunch of technologies that are reaching a point where everything's curving very sharply up. It's based on what he calls the law of accelerating technology returns or something like that. But the perspective here is not that it's just AI, but rather the combination of AI with other technologies that will really drive forward a lot of interesting innovations. The one that I think is perhaps the most interesting one to me is on the biotech side. Let me just give you a food for thought, okay? You have artificial intelligence, which effectively is a form of artificial life, okay? And we have new technologies that are emerging that are allowing us to create artificial life that may also be imbued with artificial intelligence as well. And one of the most crazy ones that I recently heard about is where you can create artificial wombs, and you can figure out
wombs like stabbing or wombs? Okay.
Yes, wombs.
All right.
To grow babies outside of a mother's womb.
Right.
They've created an artificial placenta, and there's a whole bunch of ethical concerns that emerges from this. But there's some interesting. Anyway, the combination of AI with biotechnology is what I think is going to be the most interesting sort of developments over the next 5 years.
Can I just throw another equation in there? If I say the word quantum is associated with this, how would you answer that? Does that also change it?
I don't know if I can tell you what the intersection is going to be between AI and quantum, except for the computational abilities. Yeah. But for me, I think the AI biological one is where, I mean, we all just went through COVID only a couple of years ago. But we're seeing AI create these amazing new proteins and molecules and bacteria. You can see where that's going. And so we know how impactful COVID was. Imagine that on a more regular basis. And that would be, that should scare a lot of us, right?
100%. All right. We did talk about leadership before, but I actually think this one is a slightly different take on it. It ties into the unrealistic expectations. So how do you best temper unrealistic expectations from the C-suite of what AI can do for the business?
Great question. Great question. So let's go back to system one and system two thinking. If you consider system one thinking is extraordinarily powerful. And most of our AI systems is based on system one thinking. But it's also extraordinarily flawed, right? And this is where the books Thinking Fast and Slow help you then say, okay, what are the risks associated with system one thinking? What are the limits of what we want it to do? Because it will make catastrophic mistakes. So that's one way to provide executives a way to frame what are the controls and what sort of guardrails we want to put on system one based AI systems. When it comes to agentic AI, the mental model I use for that is imagine if you hired 1,000 interns, okay, and you just let them loose. What could possibly go wrong? But moreover, what are the controls that you would want to put in? So I mentioned in that third stage of the OODA loop, you'd want to have controls like, hey, I want to limit the speed of action. I want to limit the volume of content that they may move. I may want to limit their budget, okay, or give them no budget, right? And I want to have really clear lines of authority of who, when these interns take action, when these agents take action, who's ultimately going to be accountable for this? So this mental model of, imagine if you had 1,000 interns and you just let them loose, what would you do to constrain that? That's how I would, everything has to, I think the best way to frame things is to frame it in these mental models or ways that people can relate to it so that they can then say, okay, I understand what are the right controls in these circumstances.
All right, great answer to that, but it's still, for everyone else out there who's trying to fight the sea level, sometimes it just, at least from my perspective, it comes back to a core understanding of what AI means, and most of the executives, including the CIO and CTO, can't answer that effectively. So they're making decisions for the business that may not be 100% informed. And that's one of the things I think the challenge in education is today. All right, so next question we have, how do we get started implementing all of this in practice for enterprise security? Do you have any examples?
All right, so, okay. Hopefully the agentic one is clearer in the sense of there are certain controls that we put in for limiting the number of actions or the scope of actions. When it comes to large language models and the use of large language models within an enterprise, the example that I would, one of the examples I would give that helps us think through how do you take that output and put a certain accountability around it is, for example, how we do pull requests within coding, okay? So we have what's called branch protection rules that says whenever someone creates code, someone else has to review it and commit and approve it. Well, it's the same sort of thing that you should have with any output of a large language model or any AI output. Think of it as a commit. I think of it as a pull request that someone has to go and review before it gets committed into production. If you don't have that happen, then you're creating undue risk for your own environment. Now that said, that's in the current day. With all the AI assistants, coding assistants, and vibe coding or whatever that's happening nowadays, I see the number of pull requests going up by 10, an order of magnitude, okay? And there's no way humans are going to be able to do the proper reviews. So I see where this is going too, where eventually machines are going to have to step in on our behalf. But even in those circumstances, we're going to have controls that says, okay, ultimately, you, human, are going to be responsible for this. And if this goes south, your neck is on the line. So the technology itself, I have not seen technology controls. I think these are all people and process controls. I mentioned earlier in the DIKW pyramid that all our technology control, or most of our technology controls are going to fail. Our traditional technology controls are going to fail, but our people and process controls can still hold. And so if you're asking for a technology solution, I can tell you that there aren't going to be many right now, but you have to look back at your people and process controls and see which of those apply. I'll give you an example just to play it through. One of the big concerns we have is deepfakes, right? Anyone see the show or read the book Dark Matter?
Yes.
Okay, or see the show movie Multiplicity? Okay, if you're familiar with that, so essentially that show is not about deepfakes, but it's all about deepfakes. For those who haven't seen it, some scientist figures out how to make replicas of themselves. And they end up with hundreds of these replicas of themselves. A perfect deepfake. There's no technology that could distinguish the difference between them. So all the technology controls will ultimately fail. And so in the show, the main character's wife, she comes up with a process control that enables them to determine who's who. And so I think we're going to have the same sort of situation when it comes to deepfakes within the enterprise. We have to have process controls and we revisit them to make sure that they are that they will be robust in the light of these deepfakes that are coming out.
I need to reread that now that you mentioned this. You know, it's been in quite a while, but hey, everyone, just remember, please upvote or downvote the questions that are in there because there's now about 40 50 questions in there. So if you go through, I haven't seen a lot of upvotes or downvotes right now, but we're going to continue forward. So next question, can you talk about the human in the loop with these models?
Okay, so the model, the specific model here is again the OODA loop. And the key part here where the human in the loop should be factored in is the decision making. So the whole concept of autonomous decision making is what is really should be of great concern within your organization. How will you properly control that? And there's a notion of human in the loop, human on the loop. So effectively, minimally, we have to be human on the loop. They're not in the loop in that they're the ones making the decision, but they're on the loop in the sense that you have somebody who's closely monitoring what's happening within the environment. So think of this as, here's another consideration. Microsoft calls it co-pilot, not autopilot, okay?
Sure.
There's an expectation that there's a human that is there with them. But let's consider now autopilot inside of airplanes. Autopilot inside of airplanes, we've had a number of catastrophic issues because the human who's supposed to be on the loop isn't aware of what to do when things go crazy. And so the Boeing 737 MAX 9 or 8, whatever it was, the crashes that occurred was because a human was on the loop and took the wrong actions that exacerbated the situation. So anyway, the point is that when it comes to the human on the loop, which is going to be the case with agentic AI, one is that we need to make sure that there is a human on the loop, and then two, that the human knows what sort of actions they can perform that may cause some business disruption, but doesn't cause this catastrophic crash that ends up causing more damage.
This is interesting. I'll just take another step. You just gave an example that human in the loop is, well, a couple examples, is more devastating than human in the loop from a positive side. So how do you potentially have the human in the loop make sure that they're causing positive outcomes, say with Copilot or whatnot, rather than what happened with the 737 with the, autonomous and then the human intersects?
I think we'll learn as we go. Unfortunately, this is why this is why AI safety is such a big concern, because it's sort of like once you get to a point where if AI is the equivalent of a nuclear weapon, do we want people to practice or play around with it at the potential harm that it might cause at scale? Again, there's some parts of it that are definitely overblown. There's some parts of it that are not overblown. And when it comes to learning some of these processes that we need to put in place, hopefully we're doing it with those things that are not going to result in catastrophic outcomes.
Right.
But we don't know that until we get to that stage. There's going to be some catastrophic mistakes before we really figure out, okay, we should never do that again.
Anyone else notice he just said nuclear and AI in the same sentence?
Well, going back to my comment earlier, it's not going to be a nuclear issue. I think it's going to be a biological issue that's going to cause the biggest next concern.
I don't disagree. All right. What guardrails enterprise should put in place in adopting AI to keep data secure and not just jump on the bandwagon?
So let's go back and talk about that DIKW pyramid again. It's keeping data secure is such a 90s problem. What we're dealing with now is how do we keep knowledge secure? To put it another way, I think we all recognize that there was a recent issue where just because a journalist has access to a certain chat room doesn't give that journalist need to know for the content, right? So that data level access is not what we need to start controlling. What we need to control is a knowledge level access, or what we call need to know.
Right. And
need to know is the right level, but the challenge is we don't know what need to know is because we've never actually codified it. It's a foundation for all of access control, but it's never been written down.
Right.
And so these large language models or these AI systems need to have a foundation of need to know to be able to have guardrails that are appropriate for each of the people who are interacting with it. And this becomes even more prevalent with agents because you have agents that are operating on behalf of an entity, but what's the boundary that agent's going to operate in? And there's no boundary today.
That's fascinating. All right, next question. What are the considerations for advancing AI technologies without sacrificing job security as organizations like Salesforce and Workday reduce their workforce?
All right, so this is a really tough one. And I don't have an answer, but I have a mental model again to think through. Okay, a template to how to consider this. So I was sharing this with some of the folks in our ride over yesterday. So back in the 1800s, photography became more widely available. And all these artists that prided themselves on being able to replicate portraits or landscapes as accurately as possible, they were very quickly displaced. What happened shortly afterwards was you ended up with folks like Salvador Dali and Picasso, where they produced artwork that was clearly not AI created. Sorry, not created through photography, right? So I think we're in the same sort of situation when it comes to our jobs. You have a lot of jobs that will unfortunately get displaced by something that AI can easily create. But what is it that is something that AI cannot create? Right? And going back to my the mental model around system 1 and system 2, if most of our AI systems are system 1 based, then we humans who have a system 2 brain, what I would say is find a way to maximize that and demonstrate your abilities in system 2 thinking. One of the ways to do that, you heard me say it already, is mental models. Mental models help us activate system 2 on a more regular basis. Now, we're not. It's not to say that that we will continue to beat AI machines at that level. Machines, the most advanced AI systems are now moving into the system 2 type of models. So we'll see how quickly we'll get displaced there. But the point is that right now our edge is in having a clear understanding of how to control the AI system at system 1 with system 2 type of thinking.
Okay, I have a personal question before we go back to the questions here. So, and this may be interesting to a lot of other folks in here. Real quick question to the audience. How many of you have teenagers, like in the 13, 14, 15-year-olds? Big hands. All right, so my question to you is I have 13-year-old twins, 5 years from apparently going to college. What should they study?
So there's a wonderful chart that talks about, this is in Life 3.0, the book. It talks about these 2 dimensions, and I'm trying to remember the specific dimensions, but basically on the upper right quadrant, which I guess is where everyone wants to be, you have things like homeschoolers or homeschooling. You have occupational therapists. You have things that are very require human touch, basically. Therapists, social workers, all that kind of stuff is on the upper right. It will not be it would be really hard to displace by AI.
Right.
Most of our jobs then fall somewhere southwest of that. So to answer your question, I would say there are a couple places where I've encouraged my own kids. One is learn AI, right? Learn not just AI, but like how to build AI systems. There's this is somewhat depressing, so I'm gonna caveat that.
This is great.
But there's also another perspective is wealth. Oh, an amazing book, a really, really amazing book is Blood in the Machine. Blood in the Machine.
And the machine, not and.
Blood in the Machine.
Okay, got it.
It's about the Luddite movement
Right.
and why many of us should now be neo-Luddites. But one of the key observations about that book is wealth will go to those who own the machines. So,
why is this depressing? Is that what?
It's depressing because the goal here is the only way to, if you can either be subservient to machines owned by other people, or you own the machines, and that's where wealth is starting to be generated. So whatever that means, own the machines. If you want to have a job, rather a livelihood that won't be displaced by AI itself, it's to own the AI systems themselves.
That's great. Great answer. A lot to think about. All right. I just want to do a time check because I saw the time go up. Is that the correct time? All right. Thank you. I just double checking. How mature your store needs to be? How how mature your SOAR needs to be before implementing AI agents on top of it?
Okay, so let me rephrase that question. So how mature does your process? So think about SOAR. SOAR is really a manifestation of your internal processes. How mature do your processes need to be before you let an AI basically run through that process? Well, if the process is broken, not well described, has a lot of gaps, your AI system will fall into those same traps as well. Again, consider you're unleashing 1,000 interns to go implement a certain process. What could possibly go wrong? And you'll find out very quickly when you unleash an AI system. But if you unleash an AI system and give it a lot of latitude to take action on things that are poorly described, you may end up with a lot of downstream repercussions of that as well. So how mature does it need to be? I would say your processes need to be pretty well understood. It certainly needs to be practiced. Your assumptions have to be pretty clearly documented so that there's no gap. There's a few gaps as possible in terms of what that process should entail.
Okay, tied to this, because that's a cyber defense thing. I'm curious, just overarching beyond this, what keeps you up at night?
Oh, I sleep like a baby. I wake up crying every hour.
Wow, well said. But what keeps you up at night?
There's a lot of things that keep me up. I think when it comes to AI, we talked earlier about some of the big concerns that we'll see with the convergence of some of these technologies. But I think AI is probably not I'm not so concerned about AI itself as much as how we will put it to use, right? So the technology is a tool. It's like a knife, right? You can cut things to eat food, or you can cut things to kill people, right? And so I'm less concerned about the technology and more about how people are putting it to use. What keeps me up at night is how people where there's very few controls and on the autonomous killing side of the equation. And I'm not suggesting that necessarily. We're not looking at a Terminator type of situation. We don't need, I'll put it another way, we don't need artificial general intelligence for us to create an AI system that can wipe us all out, right? We are already there. It's a matter of what are the guardrails to prevent that from happening today.
Right. All right. Yeah, 50 seconds. What parting thoughts would you give to the audience and just in general?
Well, as mentioned, I kind of hit upon it multiple times, right? So mental models are I have not, if I haven't conveyed to you how important mental models are to understanding the world that we live in, then I've failed. But hopefully you understand why mental models are useful. There are many more mental models. I would very much encourage you guys to consider other ones that can help us understand this world better. And if you discover an interesting intersection between AI and a mental model that I haven't shared, share it with the world, because it helps us all collectively understand this space. It's a very confusing space, and the better we have it in our minds, the better we can now respond to it and create the right policies and right governance structures to help address it.
That's great. All right, big round of applause for Sounil Yu.